So this is what a $2,932 PC looks like. I won't lie, this is an overpriced machine featuring the RTX 4080. Even with the 4080 Super just dropping at a $200 lower MSRP, these cards aren't exactly a good value. That said, after the upgrades I'm making to the rig today, I'll be pushing this card to its full potential, testing out 4K 240Hz OLED gaming. Whether or not we'll actually be hitting those frames is to be determined, so stick around. So the reason I'm even performing this upgrade is to reduce the significant bottleneck from the i7 9700K. This is going to be quite the improvement. I wanted to downsize my case and go for an ITX build to fit with my new minimal gaming setup, and so I scoured all of YouTube looking for the perfect small form factor, and I found jack shit. The 4080 Eagle was not gonna let that happen. It measures 342mm long, and keep in mind the Founders Edition is only 304mm. So with that, the Leanly O11 Dynamic Mini will be sticking in the setup for the time being. The only positive that comes of this is the upgrade itself is pretty cost and time effective, as I only need to replace the CPU and motherboard. Don't get me wrong though, this is still a case I can highly recommend building in. It's been with me for over 2 years through of course the original build, but now the second minor upgrade. I think the biggest selling point is its compact design. I wouldn't classify it as small form factor, but compared to a typical mid tower, it takes up much less space. It still fits every motherboard size up to ATX, which can allow you to take advantage of the extra M.2 slots, for example. Just keep in mind if you're interested in this case, it only fits an SFX power supply, so if you are coming down from a standard sized one, you have to shell out some extra cash. The Founders Edition of the 4080 only requires a 750 watt minimum, whereas Gigabyte recommends 850, so to be safe, I just went with a higher capacity one. There's not many options for SFX power supplies with this high of wattage, but the one I did find to be the best was this 1000 watt model from Silverstone. It was quite expensive, but it's not something I'll have to replace anytime soon. So to begin, we do need to first remove this GPU. Because it is so long, it requires an anti-sag bracket. We'll just need to remember to mount that to the new motherboard. Next, we'll have to unscrew the cooler. Luckily, after doing that, it can just dangle off at the side as there's no reason to remove the radiator. With those two things done, we simply need to ensure all of the cables are unplugged, which I probably should have done beforehand to be honest, and then proceed to unscrew the motherboard from the case standoffs. So the system is now gutted, and luckily I'm not going to have to do any sort of cable management, which is going to make this a very quick upgrade. I could easily finish this all in an afternoon. If you will be building this case for the first time, cable management isn't anything crazy good, but I found it to be good enough, and the case itself is fairly easy to build in. So again, I did go with the i7 13700K this time around, and I was doing a little research on the 14th gen, but to be honest, the performance improvement didn't seem to be worth it, and funny enough, it would have taken longer to deliver on Amazon. I'm happy that the CPU is still compatible with DDR4, unlike AMD's newer chips, because again, this makes the upgrade more cost effective. Not having to buy a new set of RAM sticks or a more expensive motherboard is easily $100 to $200 in savings right there. Just to be clear, I'm not hating on DDR5. If you want to go buy it, go right ahead. I just didn't feel like it was super necessary for my system. Coming from a 9th gen CPU, this is still going to be quite the upgrade, and we'll touch on the performance difference later on in the video, but man, I did not realize just how bad the bottleneck was in certain games. The motherboard I went with is the MSI Z790P, and I gotta say, this is one of the cleanest I've ever seen. I just love the all black and white minimal look that it has. This board also supports Wi-Fi 6E and 2.5 gigabit per second LAN, which has already improved my download speed significantly, being able to take advantage of my router. There's a ton of USB ports around the backside and 4 M.2 slots, which is really clutch. Dropping the CPU in here is very straightforward, and then you just need to close the latch thereafter. My cooler doesn't come with the proper LGA 1700 bracket to secure itself to the motherboard, so that was something that I had to pick up off of Amazon. After this, I installed the motherboard back into the machine. Normally, I would recommend that you install RAM and any M.2 drives before this, but I simply forgot. On the backside of the cooler, there was leftover thermal paste residue, so I wiped that off with some isopropyl alcohol and let it dry for a couple of minutes. I then went ahead and put on some fresh thermal paste. I'd recommend putting on a little more than you think you need because it's better to have too much than not enough thermal paste. The cooler itself is the NZXT Kraken X62, and this is an older version. I've had it across multiple systems for around 4 years at this point, but it served me well. This is a 280mm radiator that has managed to stay pretty silent under heavy gaming loads. There's of course 2 140mm fans attached to it, and then 6 more 120mm across the top and bottom of the case. With this fan setup, the build isn't completely silent, but it's never bothered me before, and my temps are pretty solid. For RAM, I'm using these same 32GB sticks of Trident Z Royals. They haven't made a DDR5 version of these yet, so that did add to the benefits of sticking with the DDR4 platform. They are pricey, but look absolutely gorgeous. For storage, I have two separate 1TB M.2 sticks. My boot drive is the Intel 660p. This is more of a budget one, so it isn't the quickest, but I still find that my games load up quite fast. The second is from Samsung, the 970 EVO, and I got this about a year after I originally built my PC, just to expand my storage, allowing for some extra games to be downloaded. Finally, it was time to reinstall the GPU. Again, because it is so long, the mounting bracket did need to be installed first. I bought this cable mod angled adapter because of how little clearance I have between my GPU and the side glass panel, and it's worked perfectly to solve that issue. Although I got an email at the end of December that these were actually being recalled due to the melting, and since then I've just been procrastinating looking for a direct cable to my PSU to replace it. Now, to finish off the build process, I put my Future Foundation Funko inside and closed the side panel. So with the CPU upgrade completed, I immediately saw a significant jump in performance within certain games at 1440p. Raw performance in Cyberpunk was essentially the exact same, but with DLSS enabled, I saw massive performance boosts that I was not expecting. In the ultra ray tracing mode with DLSS auto, I saw a 30% jump. With the same settings but frame generation turned on gave me an 11% jump, and then in the overdrive path tracing mode, I saw a 15% jump with frame generation enabled. Playing the finals before the upgrade, I was maxing out at around 100 FPS with a lot of variation, even dipping down to 60. Though now I'm hitting upwards of 180 to 200 frames. The same happened in Apex Legends, where I went from ranging 108 to 144 FPS to then reaching as high as 240. Seeing this now makes me feel like kind of an idiot given how long I've had this PC. Now, while it does destroy at 1440, I am switching over to a 4K monitor, so let's take a look at the performance at that higher resolution. First off, in Cyberpunk at ultra settings, you can sit around 54 FPS without any upscaling, which is definitely a very playable frame rate. With DLSS auto, you can get 109 FPS or up to 139 with frame generation. While this will add a small amount of input lag, it's barely noticeable, especially in a single player game, so I can recommend having it on. With ultra ray tracing, the game could hit 115 FPS with frame generation, and then path tracing was able to reach 78 FPS on average. In the finals with DLSS auto, the game sits around 130 FPS, and with it disabled, around 75. I think the implementation of DLSS is really good here, so having it on provides a fluid gameplay experience that looks great. Now, in Apex, the game fluctuated quite a bit. The lowest I ever saw was at about 160, but I was consistently hitting 200 and beyond. With this being a 240Hz monitor, having frame rates this high is great. If you're a super competitive gamer, you probably wouldn't be looking to play at 4K, but I think that if you occasionally play multiplayer titles and also want to have beautiful visuals for single players, a monitor like this is amazing. So I'm really happy with this whole build. To be honest with you guys, it is expensive and quite frankly overpriced, but it handles everything I want to play flawlessly, so I can't complain. Even with the 4080 Super being a little cheaper than this card was at launch, $1,000 is still a lot of money. Forgetting the card though, I think this is a fantastic case to build in, and every other component is one that I can recommend. All the parts will be linked down below in case there's something that you want to copy. Thanks for watching, and take care.